Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about pivoting against all odds. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Boulay Group, CPAs and advisors, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Minnesota Sales, a sales acceleration firm, Host Pros USA, a managed service provider of website support, management, security, and reliability. And last but not least, the Network Connect, a catalytic gateway for growing your company. First of all, before we get going, subscribe and like our Club E channel. It's going to take a moment. I'll wait for you. Just go down by the video and hit the subscribe button. It's going to help us deliver better content to you, our wonderful audience, as well as let you know when our sessions are going live. And also for you folks who like podcasts, you can now catch the Club E podcast on your favorite platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Sandy Hansen-Wolff. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
And Sandy, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, and the various activities you're involved with.
Okay, well, start out, most importantly is I consider my personal life more important than business any day. And I'm a wife, I'm a widow, I'm a stepmom. We live on a lake and on a chain of lakes in central Minnesota. So working remotely now, which many of us are, and adventure and a bit of a hippie on the side. So that's the personal. And business, I guess I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I have 3 different companies right now, 2 in agribusiness, and one is a consulting and coaching business that I've done for, and speaking actually for the last decade or more. And definitely will camp in the visionary side of things all day long, have a new idea or 2 or 3 or 10 most days. So I love that. I love taking crazy ideas and turning them into profits. So again, happy to be here. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, and then summer in Minnesota means boating and working out in the garden or the yard or what have you. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so family is very, very important to us, and anyone who lives on a lake can agree that you're very popular, especially in the summertime when you have lake right out your backyard. So we spend our summers enjoying the lake, and we get away for a little bit, but we try to safeguard our time there. And my love, I grew up on a farm here in central Minnesota, so my love is always outdoors and gardening and perhaps like seeing things grow, which is why I love the perennial garden side. So literal or figurative, business and plants. So it's just kind of my solace after a long day.
Yeah, well, that gardening does tie into your business, having 3 of your own businesses, as well as mentoring and advising other people. So that's a great combination and certainly can see the synergy there. All right, for our audience out there, you can put your questions into the comments field. You can also see Sandy's email address. Today's hashtag is pivot, hashtag pivot, P-I-V-O-T. And for those of you who are interested and want to participate, one winner is going to receive a complimentary 30-minute leadership coaching session with Sandy, where you can explore an idea to pivot your career path or business venture, maybe ignite your stuck points into simple action steps, and align your passion areas into profits. Again, hashtag pivot, and one winner will be chosen. Also, we will be fielding your questions, and our sidekick and producer today, I like to call him DJ Slayer, will be giving us our questions. All right, so Sandy, you've been through several major crises points in your business ventures that caused you to do a pivot. What happened and how did you recover?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, in 2003, I would say the first pivot actually happened by circumstance. I was working as a insurance agent actually and doing fairly well when my husband of 1 year passed away from leukemia. And that's obviously a long story of its own. So at 30, I was faced with what to do with his agribusiness company, AgVenture Feed and Seed in the Watkins area. And his thought was, if something happened to him, that I should sell. And after he passed away, I found out that the business was, we had great customers and had been in business for quite a while. However, some of the things that he knew, he, didn't have time really to share with others. And that sure taught me a lot of lessons of documentation and making sure other people know some of the key things. And so I would say my first pivot was definitely in a time of crisis. And definitely, so a few days after his funeral, I found out that the business needed, some attention before I would ever consider a sale. And we had just bought out his partner. And so I blindly went into the company because it was mine to deal with now. And great customers who stood by us and amazing employees. And it was baptism by fire because I was not involved and really hadn't taken up an interest in agribusiness at all. I grew up on a farm, but left right out of high school and other things. So that was 2003. And I would say what that taught me was the gig model back then of, the distributed company model of relying on partners, because we did not have funds at all to support anything that I wanted to try, nor did I know how. So that was the first one. The second one, I just think you say yes and figure it out when people ask you to do things. And shortly after that time, people asked me to speak on how I turned around a company in crisis. And I think the universe is funny because speech was my absolute worst subject in high school and college. And I did not care about the C grade that I got in that one when everything else had to be much higher. But I started a speaking and coaching business back then just by circumstance. And I wanted other leaders to really, I don't know if it was suffer less than I did or feel less alone. And I would say the third pivot came a few years ago when our agribusiness industry, as many industries, started shifting really rapidly. And we lost a lot of dairy customers due to a horrible downtrend, and thus ended up building New Heritage Feed Company, which was the third company we just launched a few years ago.
That is a big story that, like you said, each one of those we could unpack and spend our full time on that. And maybe we have you back and we do that. Big challenges that you had to face. How did you, on the personal front, stay positive, stay mentally strong, healthy? What did you do to take care of yourself during these difficult transitions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes I don't know that us leaders do that great in that category. But what I had decided early on actually was number one, taking care of my health. And that's another thing that I coach people on now is the former fat kid growing up, and how do I fully flourish? And I knew I needed a good mind space. So it was, I got up every morning and went on my treadmill or went outside and got physically moving and made sure I put the right food in me because I needed it just to have as clear of a mind as possible. And I think that really helps some of the stress. I have a spirit side, I would say, it's pretty universal. And learning to trust my intuitive nudges, and then aligning those with business decisions was key. But a lot of it was really just the continuous learning. And the few things that I did that really started to help was, number one, I had to realize how vulnerable I was and just own that, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I asked for help. I had to start asking for help. The other thing was I hired a coach. And that didn't happen in the first year or two, but I am a firm believer in having a few accountability partners and a coach where there were days that I was crying pretty hard on those calls because it wasn't good personally back then, and the business was suffering. And I think a lot of us can, whether there was a death or whatever, we're a lot of us are in that space now again. With this seems really overwhelming.
Yeah, and like you, I too enjoy being on the water and boating, and also work in the yard and gardens and vegetables. So I'm sure that you get a lot of therapy by doing that, at least in the summer or the warmer months.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. And I just think every leader needs reflection time. And it doesn't, like meditation is becoming more mainstream now, and spirit work and things like that. But just being out in nature or spending time by yourself, it's a great way to get downloads that you need or really think through something. And I think some of us stay in a chaotic state a little too much, where there's too much interaction and information coming at us, but just slowing down enough to, even for 5 minutes, consider and reground is pretty key and pretty simple.
Yeah. So now, with a couple of decades of work and life experience under your belts, what decision would you make differently as you look backward?
Mm-hmm. Another great question. I think first I would realize that protection and safety are an illusion. Because I think in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, if we could reach these goals in sales, if I could secure this employee or this relationship or this customer, then I'll feel safe. And we, are like most businesses, it has ebbed and flowed over the years of mostly, gratefully good years and a few very trying years. And man, you think you've arrived and you will be dumbfounded and put in your place fairly quickly. So it's that continuous, we're good now, but how do you plan for the unexpected? And we always can't. There's times that we can't, or rarely could we. So I think a lot of it is, if you're going to be in it for the long term, and not in an ignorant way where I'm not going to give up if this just isn't working, but learning to embrace the discomfort and becoming, having that as our certainty that it's going to be uncomfortable once in a while. The other thing is, I would receive a sense of being unapologetic just a little bit more than the people pleasing. That I'm more of like, make everybody happy, and I think a lot of us fall into that camp, not being unapologetic in a rude and mean sort of way, but being myself. I think at first I was lost, personally but realizing that it's okay to be me and show up that way rather than try to be someone else or try to hide some of, what it is that makes me a human being.
Yeah, I struggle with that taking care of yourself versus people pleasing thing myself. And so that is a hard one. And how have you handled that, or maybe what do you do as a reminder for yourself?
Yeah, I think actually every morning, I've read this too, that every, wise and successful leader and business person has a daily ritual in the morning. And my daily ritual, and I don't care if I have a 6 a.m. meeting, I'll get up earlier so that I don't skip my daily ritual. And you can make that obviously whatever it is, but for me, it's spending 5 to 10 minutes. The first 5 to 10 minutes I've heard are like the most impressionable for your day. So don't grab your phone, like just sit and think about, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to happen today? And frame your mind in that positive direction. And likely there are things that are going to fall apart. But if you don't start with the chaos, and the right away, the information from the outside, it helps you ground. So it's time for just reflecting. And I call it my book of magic. It's a little journal, and I'll just put down what magical things I want to happen that day. And that definitely does sound a little hippie and woo, but it's fun to go back the next day when you set your intentions right and see. So it's a little game I play, but just to reframe and I think it presents a case of receiving, like being in receiving the journey mode versus being in the fight and scratch and claw your way through a day mode.
Yeah, I've often said, you talked about getting comfortable or embracing being uncomfortable. And I have often said that uncomfortable feeling actually is something that you should move into and move toward, because you're testing yourself, you're testing your business, you're learning, you're growing, and there's a certain level of uncomfortability with that. And so I've often told people and told myself to move into that, to lean into that.
Mm-hmm. And realizing, like the topic for today of pivoting, if you're not thinking about pivoting, you likely should. Because there have been years that it's been good for, in this case, agribusiness or whatever, and all of a sudden the rug is pulled out, as we've likely seen too. And having the chutzpah to pivot is, like having that chutzpah as a business owner is, you don't always feel like it, but you still have to show up. And man, there are days that, I'm really scared today. I am really scared. Like that's the thing you're telling in your brain. And guess what? I have to show up anyway. And, there's a book out now, and I can't remember the author, but it's called Everything is Figure Outable. And I try to remember that, because maybe I don't have the answer, but someone else in my network likely does, or maybe I need to sit with it for a day or two. But our capabilities, and this is why I like coaching so much, I think, is I love mining the passion and the full capacity out of brilliant people. And it's amazing how we cut ourselves short. And I include myself in that too, of like, well, if they figured it out, why can't I? And that might not mean that I'm going to do it myself, but someone knows the answer to this.
Mm-hmm. And a reminder to our audience, you can submit your questions into the comments field. Today's hashtag is #pivot. That would put you in a drawing for a complimentary 30-minute session with Sandy to have her work with you and coach you up relative to any challenges you're having on the business front, or for that matter, the personal front, because as we've discussed here today, those two are intertwined. And you can also catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform, as well as on YouTube, Facebook, or our LinkedIn group. So again, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to us here today. So Sandy, you have two businesses in the agribusiness category. They're evolving from traditional paradigms to new channels of distribution. What have been the largest challenges that you've seen in the industry? How, if anything, has that been impacted by you being a woman? And how did you overcome any of those challenges?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think first, industry-wide, obviously, a lot of industries are in this. Agribusiness is going through many, many changes due to consumer trends changing. And I think that's front and center in the last few years, more than it's been in the last 15 before that. And it's been almost 2 decades where, consumer-driven demand for food and food safety has shifted our entire industry, and in positive ways, actually fairly exciting ways. And, Rick, I had told you earlier in an earlier conversation that I was going to exit agribusiness at one time because I was, looking for something different and a little tired and on burnout. But then there's a lot of new players and new ideas, and the paradigm has definitely shifted. As far as like my experience being a woman in the industry, first of all, what I would say to that is when I started almost 20 years ago, it was myself and, very few and mostly a lot of times no other women sitting around these leadership platforms or leadership tables. And it was a little intimidating at first, but here I am. It was the situation, and one thing losing my first husband at such an early age taught me was that we're all the same. It's one human being and one human being and one human being. So like to me, it's a very level platform. So that the level of intimidation was probably a little bit less, because we're all human beings in this room together. But I'd have to tell you, when I opened the first door to that first meeting, a week after the funeral, and it was 50 men and me, it was like, what in the world am I doing? So the first mistake I made was I tried to fit in, and I think this is a good lesson for any entrepreneur. I doubt we're wired to fit in, and that was the first lesson. I mean, this is the weirdest thing, but I would actually try to not look like a woman as much. Put my hair in a bun every day and wear muted colors and try to fit in with the guys kind of. And that wasn't working, because I think whenever you aren't authentic to who you are personally, it's hard to show up and be successful with anything. And so I remember just thinking, like, it was a weird revelation. I'm not a man, so I'm not going to be a man. And so I'm just going to own the difference. And I think that's also a great lesson for now, is like, we just need to own our difference, and how can we market that and make that work. And so I started curling my hair and wearing pink if I wanted. And I definitely got attacked a lot, or did not get invited to certain social clubs and things like that. And at first I'm like, well, what the heck, my business is multiples larger than that company that did get invited. And then I just thought, you know what, we're just going to focus on doing good. We're just going to focus on doing our work and doing good, and the rest will take care of itself. And I have to say there have been challenges, and I also want to really think about what were the stories I was telling myself versus the facts. Like, oh, I'm a woman and that's why I'm not being invited. Some of that was probably fairly true, but was I fabricating more than it was, or what was I doing to make that happen? So I think in life we can either be victim or we can be at choice. And I knew that I kind of did, I would say, unknowingly play the victim card a little bit. And but then it's like, no, I was at choice. Like, I didn't have to stay in this industry. It was my choice, even though I felt like it was what I had to do. So it's fascinating, frustrating, everything at once. But the other thing that I did, and just to wrap real quickly, is I started studying the lives of other women pioneers, because I think that just helped with that chutzpah again of, man, they had a lot more challenges than I did.
Okay, sorry about that little user error on my part. Apologize. Got all excited. I had a question here from the audience, and all right. So, question from Ed. This goes back to where we were a little bit earlier in our conversation. At your lowest point, how did you turn things around, and what was the main description of the actions or behaviors that you took to turn things around?
So mindset is a big word right now, and I would say that's a good, it's a overarching answer. So what I did was, so 6 months into it, we were going down, 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 lower, down, lower. It wasn't looking good. I hated to go to the bank because it might be the day they actually close up on us, things like that. And so I would say I was doing the right things, going to the bank, keeping close with them. and going to my accountant at least once a month. And it was during that time that, you know, he actually helped me through this. He said, Sandy, if you're going to focus on failure every day, you're likely going to head to it, which might have happened that way anyway. But he said, why don't you wake up every day, you know, face the facts that it's not good right now, but then wake up every day with the attitude of what are you going to do to make this successful today. And I swear that was a pivot point of how I thought about the business. Because instead of thinking, what is it going to be like when I fail? Or what is my life going to be like post failure? It was like, well, what if it would work? What if I could make that work? And so I just really think that that shift of mentality or psychology made me open my eyes to how we could shift the business model a little different. But I actually ended up really going rogue on our whole industry. People were calling me nuts, and I did it anyway because I couldn't see why it wouldn't work. You know, just tried really, you know, and so what we did was we don't have, like, I looked at all partners around us, you know, kind of like what we're doing now 20 years ago, and said, how can they help me without me paying for them? And it was very, very creative entrepreneurship. But I do believe in the, you can take nickels and pennies and turn them into dollars if you leverage relationships, but then tell them the truth of, I don't know the answers to this, and here's how I think you can help me and why it would be good for you. And I'm fascinated by that sort of business model. And I'm not sure if it was a multi-tiered question. If I didn't answer parts of it, I'm happy to.
No, actually, I want to draw a little something out from you. You mentioned nickels and dollars, and taking a nickel and turning it into a dollar. Explain how you can do that, as well as limitations on your business capacity and the resources that you've experienced.
Yeah. So, you know, we're all faced with times when, and I think, you know, our startup, you know, scale up type business that we have is the same thing as, you know, what, so I do think that leveraging relationships and telling people the truth and sharing your vision with passion, you know, like number one in entrepreneurship, and I've been in businesses and in jobs where I just don't have the passion for it. So it's really hard to pitch then, you know, or like force yourself into conviction that it's going to work. But if you've got enough passion behind it, you know, and you find the right people, but also having the intuitive nudges, or, you know, like the gut check of, this doesn't feel right, and really trusting that. But I actually just had a lot of meetings with people, and kind of, but what I and I still do this now. Here, instead of saying, how can you help me, I'll try to figure out, you know, like learn something about them and really try to download the solution, you know, and tell people, here's how I think you can help me, and here's how I think it could benefit. And right now we are in startup mode. Or back then it was, right now I don't have the funds to pay you, but here's how I think the payoff could go if it works long term. And you know what? Some people will walk away, and that's just fine because someone else will replace that. But it's like that radical conviction to keep the nose in check and look for that next yes. But I have been so grateful for the people who have helped me along the way when they wouldn't have had to. But people want to. But when they can see the carrot for themselves, it's a win-win, even when you only do have nickels and pennies to deal with, because they better turn into dollars. And I do think, you know, successful entrepreneurism is, you know, even in coaching, well, I don't want to charge too much, that seems unethical, you know. And my question is, why? You know, if you're a solid person, why wouldn't you get paid what you're worth, number one, and two, why don't you turn that around and do good for other people then? Like that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Reminder to everybody that if you want to go in the drawing for a half-hour complimentary session with Sandy, hashtag pivot by your comment. Also can ask questions. Also hit the subscribe and like button for Club E. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about being a visionary. You're involved with multiple businesses. You have a lot of different interests. What's an ideal future look like for you?
Well, probably, I think we all have this picture of more free time. And then when we have more free time, we tend to fill that up with something new. And I think it's just how we're wired a little bit. But the ideal future to me is I realized a few years ago that likely focusing on one business is probably not my gig, and that's why I do like the coach. I never thought I would be a coach either. But now I have my executive coaching certification, which just blows my mind. It was suggested to me a while ago, and it was one of those things you say never, but then it just happens anyway. And what it does is that teaches me a lot about business anyway. Like the certification programs did, and the people I work with there. So I think that I'll keep I could see myself being involved in a lot of different entities on some level, either on a board level or owning pieces of companies instead of, like right now they're all my solo. They're all my solo businesses. So I see the executive and leadership coaching thing still being a piece of it. Mentoring other entrepreneurs and leaders is really makes my heart sing when I can see them their fires just light up, and do consulting work with that. I love the business ecosystems, and even outside of agribusiness, I love when businesses are getting together, like the venture capital ecosystems out there, and just like I could see myself taking ideas and turning them into other new businesses, either by myself or likely more with other partners down the road. It's so fun for me to blow out an idea and make it into a successful venture. So, that might be an agribusiness. There's huge opportunities there now for a lot of us to come into the picture, and likely outside of it. Most of my coaching clients are not in agribusiness at all. And we all have the same issues, the same challenges. So sometimes we just need a good person to come alongside us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of your coaching business, I have a question from Irene here. How did you move into that? And then you mentioned a little bit about being trained, but go into a little bit more about your training.
So interesting. One of my first I would say a mentor for me is I went to I've had many mentors and still do, and I actually look up to a lot of different people and learn from them. But I went to speaker training back, I don't know, likely 10-15 years ago through the National Speakers Association. And one of those speakers said, when people ask you to do something, most people in our world will say no because it makes them uncomfortable. And I think that's the definition of success, is say yes and figure it out. But his advice to me was say yes and figure it out. And especially, and back then he meant in the speaking realm, like if someone asks you to speak on a topic, say yes, I'll come speak and do your keynote. And but then you're driving to that event where you're keynoting in front of 500 people, and you're swearing under your breath, like, what in the world have I gotten into? And this is over my head. But then you figure it out. And you don't die trying. And that's kind of how coaching started happening. Was other entrepreneurs came to me because they saw what I did, with AgVenture, or how I transformed them into tragedy. Actually, that started happening in the 2008, 2009, when others were going through turnaround and crisis. And I was happy so I said yes. People asked me if I would coach them, and I said yes. And they knew I wasn't a licensed coach, but I was someone who had walked the path. And so people kept asking, and So I learned on my own through like online platforms first, but then I recently went and got my executive coaching certification. No one, by the way, no one ever asked if I had my certification in the whole 10 years I had been doing it. I just kind of trained myself by reading, but through the Center of Executive Coaching, it's called. There's many good programs out there. But I wanted the additional learning, which is why I did it. And it is amazing. So I'm happy to share the path with anybody who wants it. I just think it's every good leader should have a good coach. It just really helps them.
Yep. So we got a couple of other questions coming in. One tying in, you got a couple of AgVentures going on, and then you also mentioned being a visionary. So tying those two together, from Becky, what do you see as the top couple of ag business trends?
People are treating, well, this has always been like this, but so I call it like the legacy side of agribusiness, which is like the traditional farm side. Everything's moving to, even in our industry, our industry did not do a good job, by the way, of, talking about food safety prior to the trends now, and we all know that. But there is a trend away from, human and in animals, away from antibiotics, away from medications. So that's a huge trend, is like the all natural, not necessarily always organic, but alternative solutions, which is why I built like New Heritage Feed Company that I built just recently. Was an idea I had that I had at a retreat, because I always try to watch what humans are doing. What are the human trends? And, so I see all these ladies in an essential oils blending class. I'm like, could we put essential oils in feed? And so New Heritage Feed Company has a whole feed line of chicken feed with essential oils. And it's not a dab here and a dab there. It's from a company that's got the science behind it, and so on. And there's a lot of, so the natural alternatives that don't replace, we can't put a health claim on any of this, like this replaces medications, but it definitely enhances immune systems and boosts so that we can prevent rather than, so that's one. The other is feed versus food. So humans now want to feed their animals food, and that's more on the maybe the specialty and consumer side of things more than the big farm side. But labeling, so like, and that's what my company wants to, the vision is too, is closing the gap between what humans are eating and what we're feeding our animals. Like, how is my food good for me? How is that food good for my animals? Because our animals are just as beloved family members, our pets, as our human companions are. So it's fascinating. The drive of technology obviously has changed a lot of things. Mm-hmm.
All right.
I could go on.
All right. Well, we'll
it's
save
a dynamic industry, obviously, and huge.
We'll save that for our next session. So we're getting toward the end of our time. Lightning round question, meaning give me a couple of bullet points or like a 20-second answer. Again, visionary, involved with multiple businesses, you're coaching, so you're talking to a bunch of different business people. What are some of the key entrepreneurial considerations that someone starting a business now should keep in mind?
You have to, number one, you have to work on your business as well as in your business, which means, like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they like their product. That's what got them started in the first place. And to realize that you can create your product and make sure you come out with a good product, by the way, that's tested and relevant and all of that. So do your homework. But the other thing is, a lot of startups don't realize that working on your business feels very different than working in your business, which means like accounting, bookwork, beating the streets to get more sales and things like that. So there's two very, very distinct paths there. So if you're not the one to be working on your business, find someone who wants to, and then I would say second part of that is find help. Because if you're going to do anything successfully, usually it's not a solo act.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. So to kind of wrap up our conversation today, what's the one thing you'd like to leave with our audience as something that you really want them to take away and remember? Maybe it's something that you want to reiterate that we've talked about, or maybe we didn't cover something, but what's that one major takeaway that you'd like to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I would say it's more on the person behind the entrepreneur or leader, or person that has the idea. I think we are in a huge time of awakening, maybe to many, many, many people, just the whole collective awakening to, this pandemic and other world changes have caused us to really reconsider, what is it that I'm doing? And does this really align with who I am? And I think a lot of us are sitting at our desks right now. I see this in coaching of, this is really great. I'm making great money doing it, but it's so out of alignment with what I really want to do. And then the next question is, I don't really know what I want to do. What is that? And but really to honor those nudges going on, because I do believe that it's also the time for entrepreneurship to soar. Out of crisis comes the best and most amazing businesses. I mean, that's been studied throughout history. And so, like if someone out there is feeling that nudge of, this is not the right thing for me, then, making brave moves right now is totally the energy that we should be in. And that is really scary, really scary. And every day I sit by my desk now, I'm like, I have, in many ways, I have no idea what I'm doing, as far as like scaling this new business. This feels so different. And but owning that and saying, well, then what do I need to do today? But I think many are looking and saying, this isn't the life that I thought I was, going to have, and that's in the past. But what can I do now and moving forward? And taking that brave approach to, really, really dig in and find the fire again, and then build out accordingly.
Yep. So I lied. One last question.
Okay, no problem.
So tying in kind of your work as a coach, as well as being a visionary and business owner, another question from Ed. Who would be the top 2 or 3 entrepreneurs or business people that you either admire or follow or read?
Yeah, I would have to say some of them are more on the, like I follow some that are more on this. Mike Dooley, for example, is an author, and he's all about, he was in the book The Secret, so a lot of the people that I look to are those that understand the relationship between metaphysics and business, because I think that's the magical connection. So I could list many, but like books like, I think Law of Attraction, I mean, whatever you want to call it, Law of Attraction is what Mike Dooley's into, but there's so many like that. So like my best, what do I read in the morning when I'm doing my time is I'll read a quote from Mike Dooley. I'll get I'll look at some sort of higher level business coach than myself, like Tony Robbins. And I kind of jump around. But I'll also, just being a woman, I'll make sure I've got some, woman influence in there too, and look at some of the pioneers and read some of their literature. books by Florence Scovel Sheen is her name. I believe she died in the 1930s or 1940s, cannot remember. Totally ahead of her time. But her books are all about, thinking correctly and things like that. So it's kind of a multifaceted thing because I jump around. And I'd be happy to answer that in a longer email if someone wants to email me too.
Sure.
It really is that intersection between, what sort of superpowers do I have, and then how do I bring them into literal business?
Okay. All right. So for anybody who wants to reach out to Sandy, her email address will be in the comments field. Again, #pivot to get into the drawing for a complimentary session. Or you can put in the comments field that you'd like Sandy to reach out to you. However you want to get in touch with her, comments field is the way to do that. Sandy, it's been a pleasure and very interesting having you here today. I'd like to have you back again and enjoy the rest of our late summer, early fall on the lake and in your garden.
Yes, well, thank you. It's always a humble privilege when when you're asked to be on podcasts, and Rick, I have a lot of respect for what you do too, and my pleasure. We're all in this together, so let's help each other.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Bye now.